All right, crew. Today we're taking a closer look at the purchase and sale agreement. We're going to take this slow, work our way through it, because this document's the heart of every single offer, every single contract that we write. So we want to make sure that we get things correct on this. So switching over to our screen view, starts out with what is our offer date. So today's date goes right here at the top. We're putting in our address. Okay, so our 123 Main Street, city, county, and zip code. So Snellville, Gwinnett 30078. Now the broker has instructed us to leave the MLS number and the tax parcel ID number blank, or to put in just a series of X's. So put 5 or 6 X's in both of those so that the other side knows that we intentionally left it blank. It is not wrong to have the MLS number and the tax parcel ID number in there, but it is not necessary. And for that reason is why they instruct us to leave it off, because that's just one more thing that can get messed up. If we have an address here and a legal description here, and it does not match the MLS number, it does not match the tax parcel ID number, it calls into question, are we talking about the right property? And from a legal standpoint, the only description of the property we need, the property that we are buying in the contract, is the property identified in the legal description. So the MLS number and the tax parcel number are really irrelevant. All we need is the legal description, and then we put the common address, the way we refer and talk about properties in here, as a point of reference to make sure that we have the correct property down here. And you're not going to have a conversation with somebody and say, hey, I'm wanting to put an offer in on the property at deed book 123, page 467. We just don't talk like that. We want to put an offer in on 123 Main Street. So that's the reason for putting the address in there. Really, the address is not necessary, but it makes it easier for us to communicate. So address, city, county, and zip code. Leave the MLS and tax parcel ID number blank or X them out. And then we get to one of the most important parts of the document, and that is the legal description. Okay, you cannot have a legally binding contract without a legal description. Okay, we have to have it at the time that the contract is signed. So a couple of ways that we can get it, and these are kind of in the order that we prefer. Okay, first we'd love to have a copy of the deed. Okay, and we would attach the deed to this contract. So we have to mark our checkbox here. Okay, we'll also, in our list of documents, we would list that the legal description is attached, and on the deed itself we would put the exhibit letter, and have our clients initial it that that's the right exhibit. Okay, but the seller's not always going to have the exhibit. As a buyer, the listing agent's not always going to have provided the deed to us. The easiest way to find a property is going to be in the CRS tax suite or in FMLS's Realist, and that's to find the deed book and page. So we go look at the tax record at Georgia MLS's CRS tax suite or FMLS's Realist, and go look at the sales history in the tax record. And over at somewhere in the description for the most recent sale, you're going to see book and page listed. That is the deed book and page. That's where the last transfer of that property was recorded. So put that in. In any one of the deed book and pages that are listed there, work. In every one of those cases, we're talking about the same property. It doesn't matter if owner A sold it to owner B sold it to owner C sold it to owner D. Every single time that deed is recorded, we're talking about the same piece of property. But I just use the newest deed book and page as a point of reference. Okay. Skipping down to number 4, this is probably the toughest definition, and that's the reason I encourage you to skip this. In order for number 4 to be a legal description, we need 4 pieces of information. We need the lot, we need the name of the subdivision, and we need the plat book and plat page. And very, very often that information is not available in the CRS Tax Suite and Realist. We can't find that information. So deed book and page becomes a much easier way to find it. So I encourage you, don't use number 4. Either use deed book and page or attach it as an exhibit. Now, if it's a condominium, there is another exhibit that you can use, but I don't want you to. Okay. Condominiums are a type of ownership where the owner owns their space and they own a share of the common space. And each of those ownerships is recorded in a different place. And so you need a different plat book and page for each of those. It winds up being a very long description, and it's extremely challenging to find all the information you need for that to be a valid legal description of the property. So anytime you are doing a condominium, my recommendation is go get a copy of the deed. Either get a copy of the deed from the listing agent or go visit your friendly local closing attorney and ask them if they will print you a copy of the deed. And if you've got a good relationship with them, you'll find that they'll be happy to do that for you because they want to keep you happy and earn your future business. But don't abuse that privilege. So they're not in the business of providing deeds. They're in the business of closing deals, but they're happy to do that as a favor for you. Okay. As an alternative, you can go subscribe to GSCCCCA and load and print your own documents. That's a subscription service. There is a monthly cost to that. But if you find yourself doing enough business and you prefer the deed to be your legal description, you can do that. But again, 90% of the time is going to be just deed book and page. Okay. And if you receive an offer from someone else and they've used number 4, just know it is not a legal description if it is missing the lot, the subdivision, the plat book, or the plat page. Okay. Moving on, what's the purchase price of the property to be paid by the buyer? And we want to put our purchase price in here in US dollars. Funny we have to say that because we've seen contracts that people have tried to put other currency in there, but that is always, always, always in US dollars. Okay. Paragraph 3, what are we asking the seller to contribute at closing? These are seller's contributions to buyer's closing costs. Okay. The seller has their own costs that they have to pay at closing, but they are significantly smaller than what the buyer has to pay. So it's very common that buyers ask the seller to help with their closing costs. That's what this number is right here. Okay. And in today's market, we're in a heavy seller's market. So sellers are less apt to contribute or certainly offer to contribute less or willing to contribute less than they have in the past. As markets change, you will find sellers willing to do more or willing to do less. We just happen to be at a time where they're willing to do less right now. Historically, 2 or 3% has been common. Now it's become very common that it's 0 up to 2%. Somewhere in there is a normal range. And that's going to be a case-by-case basis. You know, take a look at the comps and see what other sellers have been doing to know how to be most competitive there. And obviously, the less help you ask for from a seller, the better your offer is going to be. Paragraph 4, closing date shall be. This cannot be to be determined. We have to have a definitive date in there. It can also not be on or before. Okay, it needs to be a set date. If the buyer and the seller agree, we can always do an amendment and change that date in the future, but we don't have a valid contract if we don't have a definitive closing date. So in here we want to be closing on December 5th, January 3rd, March 24th. Pick a set date. And then when will the possession of the property transfer to the buyer? And ideally, in all cases, that's going to be at closing. Make sure you mark the checkbox, okay? Or if the seller's staying in the property after closing, which we do not recommend, but that's a conversation for a different time, you would mark this box and how many days after closing and at what time. And never, never, never under any circumstances do we ever want, as a buyer or a seller, the buyer taking possession of the property before closing. And that too is a different conversation for another time. So hopefully, ideally, every one of your closings, possession will transfer at closing. Paragraph 5, who's going to hold the earnest money? Okay, and we have two options. It can either be one of the brokers in the transaction, or it can be the closing attorney. So that's it. So the buyer's broker, the seller's broker, or the closing attorney is going to be holding it. We certainly are happy to hold it. And if we're going to be the holder of it, we need to make sure we use the broker's full name. Keller Williams Realty Atlanta Partners, all spelled out, no abbreviations in there. If the other broker is going to be holding it, put their information in there. If we are the holder, we will hold up to $5,000. Okay. If it's going to be more than $5,000, we recommend that the closing attorney hold it, unless it's a cash purchase, in which case we encourage you to get permission from the broker for us to hold the earnest money. If it's over $5,000, get special permission to do that. But that is just on cash transactions. Okay, so on all of our other transactions, we're happy to hold up to $5,000. And if it's more than $5,000, have the closing attorney hold it. If the closing attorney is holding it, you will see there are two other documents that we're going to have to use. The F510, which is the buyer and the seller agreeing that the attorney is going to hold the earnest money, and the timeline that has to be met for them to do it, and the 511, where the closing attorney agrees to be the holder of the earnest money. In paragraph 6, we're going to name the closing attorney or the closing attorney law firm. You can either list the agent by name or list the firm name in here. I recommend putting the firm name in here, and also their location. Very commonly, for example, O'Kelly and Sorahan will be the attorney closing the transaction. They have something like 24 different locations. So which one are we closing it at? Who's pulling the title? Who's doing the work? We want to make sure we get agreement up front. So O'Kelly and Sorahan, Snellville, perfectly acceptable. Don't need to have the exact address. We just want to differentiate, make sure we know which one it is. Paragraph 7, the earnest money. How is the earnest money being received, and when is it being received, and how much is it? Okay, so if we are already holding the earnest money when we write the contract, not we're getting it this evening, not that we're picking it up first thing tomorrow morning, we have it right now, then we would mark box number A. We have $2,000 as of the offer date, okay, which means that we have it in our hand when we're writing the contract. Keep in mind, you are signing this contract also as the agent, and you are signing saying that what's in here is true and accurate. So you're saying that you have already received and are holding $2,000 as of the offer date if we mark it. Okay. Option number B, $2,000 within 3 days from binding agreement date. Okay. So we don't have it yet, but we know that we're going to be getting it. In option C, if neither of these descriptions work and we need a different description in here, we have room to add a longer description in here. Okay. Typically, a common figure you're going to see for the earnest money is going to be 1% of the sales price rounded off to the nearest $500. Okay, that's a pretty typical amount. But obviously, the more earnest money you put up, the more serious it shows that you are as a buyer. So a higher number there is going to make your offer more competitive. Lower is going to make it less competitive. A couple of things we need to know. If the holder of the earnest money is one of the brokers, it's going to be paid by check. Okay. I don't know anybody that takes cash, so that's not ever going to be an option. So if it's a broker, it's going to be a check. If it's the closing attorney holding the earnest money, it is going to need to be a wire transfer. Okay, so those are our only options there. Paragraph 8, our due diligence period. Property is being sold to a due diligence period of, and this is how long our buyer has to decide if they want to move forward with the property or not. This is our time when we do our inspections and potentially negotiate any repairs or adjustments to the contract before we move forward. So a typical number that we see in there today is either 7 days, okay, and that's going to be on the more competitive side, or 10 days is a little less competitive, but still very common and pretty reasonable, because we need enough time to schedule our inspection, have our inspection, get our results back, and negotiate an agreement between the buyer and seller, any adjustments to the contract, any repairs, if any. Okay, certainly not there. 8B, option payments. This is something that broker does not want to see us doing. They're not in support of it. So I don't want you guys looking at that yet, filling that out. If you feel tempted that we need to do an option payment, we certainly want to have some conversation with you ahead of time. Feel free to call me, email the broker, have some conversation there. This may be something, if we continue to have a really heavy seller's market, we may see this show up more, but this has not been commonplace in Georgia yet, and we're not really excited about seeing it in Georgia. So we really want to avoid that if we can. Paragraph 9, we have to mark a box here. The home and any portion or fixture inside the property was built or manufactured before 1978 or was not built prior to 1978. It is a clear-cut case. It was, which in case we need an additional exhibit, the lead-based paint exhibit, or it was not built prior to 1978. They stopped making lead-based paint and using it in manufacturing in 1978. So anything prior to that, there's a chance that there's lead in it, not definitively. Anything built after 1978, we're not going to find it there. Paragraph 10, what are our brokerage relationships? And the majority of the time, we're going to be representing whoever we're working with as a client. We have a client relationship, meaning we have a buyer's brokerage agreement or an exclusive seller's listing agreement. But there's always the possibility they may be a customer as well. If we're working with a seller as a customer, we're going to have an authorization to show enlisted property. If we're working with a buyer as a customer, we're going to have an agreement to work with buyer as customer agreement. Okay, so that's going to be pretty clear cut. But normally we're going to have the selling broker in here, and the selling broker is Keller Williams Realty Atlanta Partners and is representing buyer as the client. Same thing on the other side. Whoever the broker is that they work for, we're going to put their name in there, and we're going to assume they're representing them as a client. Okay, but if you are representing both sides of the transaction, we as a brokerage do not offer dual agency. So we cannot represent both sides as a client. So in the case where you had a listing, you had an agent, a buyer show up. They were not represented by an agent. They were willing to work with you as a customer. They signed an authorization to work with buyer as customer agreement. Then we would have the selling broker is working with the buyer as a customer, and we're representing the seller as a client. If we're working with a buyer and we go show a for sale by owner, we're going to be representing the buyer as a client. We're going to be working with the seller as a customer. Okay. Now, the one that gets messed up very frequently is designated agency. If both agents in the transaction work for the same broker, so somebody works for Keller Williams Atlanta Partners and is representing the buyer, and they go to a property that another agent has listed that's also with Keller Williams Atlanta Partners, we're going to have designated agency. Okay, so selling broker is Keller Williams Atlanta Partners and is acting as a designated agent where John Smith has been assigned to exclusively represent the buyer, and the listing broker is Keller Williams Realty Atlanta Partners, acting as a designated agent where Jane Doe has been assigned to exclusively represent the seller. Okay, that way somebody has someone assigned to them as their fiduciary and is looking out for their best interest. Okay, material relationship disclosure. Anytime you have a relationship on either side of the transaction, the broker asks that you disclose it. And that's any relationship. You used to work with them. We've been good friends since high school. As ridiculous as that may sound to you, nobody has ever gotten in trouble with the Georgia Real Estate Commission for over disclosing, for sharing too much. So disclose any relationship there is, but legally make absolutely certain that you disclose any relationship that crosses the aisle. If somebody on the listing side has a relationship with somebody on the buyer side, we definitely want to make sure that that's disclosed. So the buyer knows the seller, the buyer knows the listing agent, the seller knows the buyer's agent. We want to make sure that's in here. That's an absolute. Okay. But again, the broker recommends that you disclose anything. Okay. So listing agent is related to seller. That's all that we need in there. Okay. Time limit of offer. The offer set forth herein expires at 3:00 p.m. on, and whatever the date is, a day or two from now. Okay. And keep in mind, this is not a place to leverage and try and force the other side to make quick decisions. We want to give them enough time to make those decisions, so be reasonable there. Keep in mind who the client is, or the person on the other side is. You know, it's silly to put an expiration date for a Sunday afternoon if the seller is a corporation. Nobody's going to be looking at those contracts until Monday. So if it's a holiday, you know, I wouldn't put a time limit of offer that expires on Christmas or, you know, the New Year's Day, you know. So give enough time that the other side can reasonably consider your offer and make a decision. Buyer and seller both initial the bottom of the first page, and our next several pages are all a bunch of legalese. Now, one of the things I want you to know and understand about this is section A, okay? And at the beginning of the second page, we're in section B. Everything in section B is an explanation of what was in section A. And to show you an example of that, so let's consider holder of earnest money. We're in A5 right here. So if we go to B5, it should be talking about the closing, the holder of the earnest money. So 5 here, holder of earnest money. 5 here, holder of the earnest money. So anytime you're trying to understand what are the rules for what applies on the first page, what if this happens, what if that happens, you're going to find that explanation in the corresponding paragraph in the back. And I cannot encourage you enough. Go through, read the document, know every line, every paragraph, understand what is in there. This is how you protect your client. This is how you know what the rights they have, what the options they have, and how to best serve them is by really, truly understanding your contracts. The legalese continues into Section C, which are other terms and conditions. So this lets you know that all notices need to be in writing, that expectations in terms of the quality of repairs and definitions and things like that. And then we get down to paragraph A, and this is where we have our exhibits and addenda. Okay, go back to our exhibits and addenda. And we're going to mark in here what is being made part of the contract. Okay, so, and I encourage you, every offer you're doing, review this list. Make sure you're not forgetting something that needs to be in here. Okay, double check and make sure, did I need a lead-based paint exhibit? Double check and make sure, is the closing attorney acting as the holder of earnest money? Double check and make sure you included a financing contingency in here. And you're always going to have a financing contingency. It's either going to be an all-cash sale, it's going to be a conventional loan, an FHA loan, a USDA, or a VA. So we're always going to have at least one exhibit to our contract. Okay, we should always have two. We should have our financing exhibit, and ideally, we're always going to have a seller's property disclosure. But that's a battle that we can talk about at a different time. The other things that you need to know about this, we need to put our exhibit letter in here. Exhibits are always lettered. They're lettered with capital letters. So we would have our conventional loan exhibit, and we're going to put exhibit A in here. And that should match the exhibit letter that's on the top of the conventional loan exhibit that we are also sending with the contract. So keep in mind that when we talk about a contract, that is not just a purchase and sale agreement. It is the purchase and sale agreement plus all of the exhibits that are attached to the contract. Okay, and all the ones that we use most commonly have all been listed here for us. So our financing exhibit, our backup agreement, our community association disclosure, our lead-based paint, our sale or lease of buyer's property contingency are going to be the ones that we use most often. Okay, we're going to see those all the time. But we've also got the option down here to add others. Just remember, we don't check the box. It's not part of the contract. So check the box, put the exhibit letter in here. And then we get to our special stipulations. This is where we're able to add all of those extra things if they need to be part of the agreement that are not covered anyplace else. This is where we have the option to ask for a home warranty. This is where we have the option to ask for the seller's property disclosure or the community association disclosure to be provided. This is where we might ask for a survey. This is where we may ask for certain repairs to be done if we know they have to be done in order for us to move forward with the contract. Okay. We'll also have the option to ask for repairs after the inspection. But if we know at the time we're making the offer, if this is not done, we don't want to buy the property, don't be afraid to go ahead and include that in here. Okay. This is where we provide the language. Okay. But that's not a comfortable place for us to be. We don't like using our own language in here. We are not authorized to write contracts. So we want to, anytime that we can, we want to go take the language that an attorney has already written for us. So every year, the Georgia Association of Realtors provides us with a long list of pre-written special stipulations. And our preference is always that you use the attorney's language that has been put together for requesting that missing seller's property disclosure, for requesting that home warranty, for requesting a termite inspection. There's already stipulations that have been written for you. Go take that language, modify it a little bit if you need to, and then put that in here. And if we do not have enough space in here to put our special stipulations, we come down here, we mark additional special stipulations, and we go grab that page, that's another GAR form, and we include that with our contract. And then we get to our signature page. For our clients, all we want to see you put in here is their name and have them sign, okay? You do not need to put their address. You do not need to put their phone number. You do not need to put their email address. And we recommend that you don't. If the other side of the transaction needs to get hold of your client, we don't want them having their address. We don't want them having their email. We don't want them having their phone number. We want them calling you, okay? And then at the bottom, the selling broker and listing broker information. And all of this information does need to be provided with one exception. Don't put fax numbers in here, okay? Do not put the fax number. Do not put the office's fax number. And I actually encourage you not to use a fax yourself. So exclude the fax. That's old technology, and the rules that are around it are different than the rules for email. And unless you are policing your fax machine, okay, which most of you are not watching the fax machine here at the office, you're not going to know if a notice, an amendment, a termination, an acceptance comes in on that fax line at the moment it happens. We do a pretty good job of monitoring our emails, and we should know immediately when one of those things comes into our email. We're not necessarily going to know that with our fax. So I encourage you to skip that. And then our last little box down here is our binding agreement date. Okay, this gets completed after everyone has signed the contract. And what this box means is this is an acknowledgement that we're all in agreement that this is the date that everybody signed it and everybody has a copy, okay? Until everyone has signed the contract and everybody has a copy, we don't have a binding agreement, and thus don't have a binding agreement date. So once everybody has signed it, once everybody has a copy, either agent can complete this box. And we're going to put the binding agreement date in this transaction as the date of, and that's the date that everybody had a copy of a fully executed contract, and the name of the person is filled in. So when does that binding agreement take place? So I send an offer over to the other agent. They review it, they like it, they sign it, and they email it to me at 11:30 at night. I don't wake up until the next day and open my email up and I see that they've now signed the contract. Well, I can fill in the binding agreement date now if the other side didn't do it. But I have to put yesterday's date, because once something is sent in email, it is assumed to have been received. So I had the contract yesterday. May not have looked at it, may not have reviewed it, but yesterday I had a fully signed contract. So just make sure you've got clarity on what that binding agreement date is. It's not when do you know that you have a fully executed copy. It's when you do have a fully executed copy. And it is assumed that if the agent has it, the client has it. So me receiving it is the same thing as my client receiving it. So as soon as they hit send on their computer, we then had a binding contract. So I would put yesterday's date and I would fill this in, or they could have yesterday as they are sending it, knowing that they're about to hit send, they could have gone ahead and filled in yesterday's date and put their name in here and then sent me the binding agreement. This box does not have to be completed for us to have a binding contract. This is a formality. The broker does want to see you fill this in. Compliance will spit it back to you if it is not filled in. However, all it takes to have a binding contract is a fully signed contract by both sides and everybody having a copy of that fully signed contract, and you have a binding agreement. So that brings us to the end. Guys, if you got any other questions about the purchase and sale agreement, call me, text me, email me. I am here for you. And good luck out there. Have a great day.